My interest in eccentrics was aroused after a friend gave me a book which I was to reread many times over the years. That book is English Eccentrics by Edith Sitwell. In fact, my very first historical features on YouTube were of eccentric people from our past. And so it is with great pleasure that I present to you here another notable English eccentric. I do hope you enjoy this presentation in my series of wonderfully strange-hearted characters who make life such a colourful tapestry. A man steeped in layers of mystery, the 5th Duke of Portland, born on the 17th of September 1800 and remaining unmarried and childless, started life as Lord John Bentinck. He became the Marquess of Titchfield upon the suspicious death of his elder brother, and passed on his title to a cousin when he died in 1879. But some claimed he had forged a second identity as Thomas Druce, owner of the Baker Street Bazaar and subject of countless rumours about his secretive lifestyle throughout British high society. William John Cavendish Scott Bentinck, the 5th Duke of Portland, was a very reclusive man. He wasn't very keen on meeting people and banished them from his home, Welbeck Abbey in Nottinghamshire. He even went one step further and decided to live underground, building a series of subterranean rooms including an underground ballroom and a billiard room so big it could house 12 billiard tables. These rooms and various others were connected by 15 miles of tunnels. One tunnel, 1.25 miles long, connected the coach house to Worksop railway station. This made it possible for him to travel in a blacked-out carriage to the station, where his carriage was then loaded onto a railway truck. When he reached his London home in Cavendish Square, his servants were sent away and knew not to gaze upon him, as he climbed from his coach and rushed into the seclusion of his study. It was estimated that between £2 and £3 million sterling was spent by the Duke in putting his ideas into execution, and one of the positive effects of his mad expenditure was the employment of a large number of men in work that was not altogether of a useless nature, as he made great improvements in agriculture, following up on his father's ideas, adding to the national wealth by producing crops in an area previously uncultivated. The 5th Duke of Portland may have seemed peculiar to many, but he was certainly not mad. In a time of abject poverty in Worksop and the surrounding areas, the Duke's preference for excavations and underground workings provided a living for 15,000 workmen for 18 years at an annual cost of £100,000. It was said at the time that the prime reason for all of the work was to provide a living for as many of the locals as possible. The fifth Duke was a very kind man, despite his idiosyncrasies. He was often called the workers' friend. New workers were provided with a suit of clothes, a top hat, an umbrella, and a donkey. Now this might seem a little mad, but there was a method behind the madness. It was to aid workers who had to travel some distance across the estate, regardless of inclement weather, and the Duke did not want workers exhausted and miserable before they arrived at their place of work. The Duke was very introverted. He had no desire to meet people, and no one received an invite to his home. His rooms had double letterboxes, one for ingoing and another for outgoing mail. His valet was the only one he permitted to see him in person in his quarters. He would not even let his doctor in. Servants who ever encountered him in the corridors were forbidden to look into his eyes and had to exit immediately whilst facing towards the wall. All other business with his solicitors and agents he dealt with by mail correspondence. He was also extremely fond of the opera, and in his halcyon youth had courted the singer Adelaide Kemble. He even picked up the courage to propose to Adelaide, but was turned down by her. Rejection did not sit kindly on John's shoulders. After Adelaide turned down his proposal, John, already a staunch introvert and sensitive fellow, turned into a recluse. He almost never left his rooms, except to go out for nocturnal walks on his estate. In order to see where he was going, a female servant was under strict orders to walk exactly 40 yards in front of him, with a lantern to light his way. When he was pressed to go out during the day, he would only do so if he was wearing 2 huge overcoats and a tall hat. He armed himself with an umbrella to hide behind, in case anyone dared talk to him. A curious room that he used during the daylight hours shows his tendency to emulate the mole. It was equipped with a trapdoor on the floor, by which he could descend underground to wander through the tunnels without anyone noticing his absence. The trapdoor had incorporated a reversible opening and closing system, which meant he could walk unnoticed beneath his entire estate, and reappear in the abbey as mysteriously as he had left it. The bed in this room had also been designed by him and built in the estate workshops. Its structure was an immense square by design, a kind of box which took up most of the space in this empty room. It was a huge piece of furniture, a hideout. The bed had large vertical boards arranged in such a way that when they unfolded, it was impossible to know if the bed was occupied by its owner. He stripped Welbeck Abbey of furniture and painted most of the rooms pink. And when he grew bored of that, he drew up plans for the biggest renovation project any home during his lifetime had ever seen. Beneath his home he constructed a picture gallery, ballroom, a library, an observatory with a glass ceiling, and the billiards room. Some of the tunnels were made with glass ceilings to let the light in case it got too gloomy. Furthermore, he installed vibrant gas lighting throughout the complex, so he could traverse it in the middle of the night. They say that when arriving at a large party at Welbeck Abbey, guests were transported to the ballroom while still in their carriages, by a hydraulic lift and a gently tilted tunnel, leading them directly to the ballroom. Guests were witness to a magical moment, entering a landscape corridor from the park, to gently descend down to the chamber. There the Duke waited to receive them. A handwritten letter from one of those privileged guests, found in the archives, narrates, "A servant precedes us, showing us the way to the ballroom. We follow him through a dimly lit corridor that looks more like a theatre's elevator than a stately house. We entered here from the park through a kind of covered lodge, in which several carts await the entrance ritual. The sound of the dance filtered through like a joyful noise in the street. The echo of a wave of applause resounded from deep within the earth. And, as if fleeing from them, the Duke appeared, hurrying up that ramp. We descended from our carriage, and, without knowing very well how it happened, he disappeared before our very eyes." The additions to the estate lasted for 25 years. At one point he even tried to create some tunnels beneath the lake on the estate, though that project had to be abandoned. As the Duke grew elderly, the house fell into a state of disrepair. By 1879 the only rooms that were habitable were John's own. The floors were bare and the furniture removed. The older he got, the more reclusive he became, and by the time of his death, he had a habit of insisting that chickens be roasted at all times of the day, and that the servants only bring him his food on heated carts in his tunnels that connected with the kitchens below. In one of the very few letters found that was written by the 6th Duke of Portland referring to the unique life of his predecessor, it is narrated that, As he was arriving at Welbeck Abbey for the first time during Christmas of 1879, just after the death of the reclusive 5th Duke, his servants had to place temporary boards over piles of rubble in order to access the building. As they entered the Abbey that day, the reception room no longer had a floor. It had collapsed, and a large tree emerged happily from the basement. The late Duke was no doubt so absorbed in his ambitious underground tasks that he neglected what was happening on the surface. There are many doubts surrounding the true underlying causes of his obsession with camouflage and concealment. The rejection by Adelaide Kemble certainly contributed to his lack of self-confidence in public, but very few have documented the main reason why the Duke preferred to remain hidden. He suffered a skin disease in the form of acute psoriasis, which was subsequently aggravated by arthritis and terrible neuralgia, in which the only relief was avoiding light and noise. The shy recluse died on December the 6th, 1879. He was 79 years old. He spent the last days of his life in London at Harcourt House because Welbeck Abbey was no longer habitable. He died there strolling alone on a rainy December afternoon. It was his last solitary journey. He was buried in a simple grave at Kensal Green Cemetery in North London. With no direct heirs to inherit his estate after him, the estate fell to his cousin, another William. Eventually part of the estate would be converted into a museum, commemorating the Duke's strange reclusive life. In 1896, after the 5th Duke's death, an application was made by the widow of Walter Thomas Druce, son of the late Thomas Charles Druce, the owner of Baker Street Bazaar, London, for T.C. Druce's body to be exhumed from the Druce family vault at Highgate Cemetery. She claimed that her father-in-law T.C. Druce was in fact the 5th Duke of Portland, who had worked as an upholsterer for some years, then staged a sham burial as Druce in 1864. The coffin should, therefore, be empty. The case to claim the Portland inheritance was continued by members of the Druce family for some years after Mrs. Druce was admitted to an insane asylum in 1903. A company was set up to support the case, and a capital of over £30,000 was invested by the public in expectation of huge profits. The coffin was finally opened in 1907 and was found to indeed contain a body, that of T.C. Druce, the upholsterer. The Druce Portland Company kissed goodbye to their investment as the legal case collapsed. There are many people who, given the chance, would choose to live a life of wealthy eccentricity and avoid contact with other people, but their circumstances do not allow it. People like the Duke of Portland and King Ludwig II of Bavaria simply possess the financial means to fulfill their ambitions.
Hey pals, Sir Adkins here. Why, that damn skeleton and smoke and embers, worse than those cheap cigars. I would just like to give a special thanks to the top tier patrons: Margaret Potkeeter, Josie Kidd, Ghost City Shelton, and Laura Jane. Thank you so much. With that money, Uddy keeps me in cigars and brandy all year. Also, a big thanks to the devoted patrons: Kelly Corteses, Jay Etchells, Rebecca Norton, Sandy Lusk, Taffy Grease, Amy Stringfellow, Renee Poulin, Shelley Valadez, Thomas Ward, Susanna Andrea, Bonita Martin, and Laura Jane. Thank you, pals, because Artie buys me with that money a new suit every 10 years. Ain't I so lucky? Anyhow, I'm getting the hell out of here. This place gives me the creeps. I'm sure as it's haunted. Know for sure that Sir Adkins loves you. Bye-bye, pals.
My dear friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation, another in the English Eccentric series. When I first envisaged these presentations, it was mainly about English eccentrics and American eccentrics, and I have done a few over the years, wandered a bit away from it, but I always come back to the eccentric people. They fascinate me. As did the 5th Duke of Portland. What a strange fellow, indeed. Everything, of course, that is manifested in the physical comes from the spirit. We imagine it in the spirit and we cause it to manifest by whatever means. Anyway, I'm not going to get into all of that. There is a school of thought that we're living in a hologram, etc., but I'm not here to discuss that. I'm here to discuss the Duke of Portland and everything that he created manifested from his thought, from his desire to escape his misery. Misery caused by the ailments he suffered from. And he wanted to create a world that would alleviate that he could get around. And he had the money to do so. I think, well, why not? You know, why should he leave it to another generation if he's in misery? Go ahead. Not only do you have the distraction for years and years and years of managing the creation, the overseeing the projects, but you've given work also to the people around the area. I'm sure that wasn't his primary motive. I'm sure it was really his own obsession because of his shyness. But he created the world that he needed, and he had the money. Most people don't have the money. If they suffer from these terrible conditions, then they just have to put up with it. If you're living on a small income, it is quite mind-boggling, though. Not only what he created, Well, he didn't create it himself, but he oversaw what was created. It's amazing. It's amazing because it actually shows you the evidence of someone's obsession, of a lifelong obsession. And then at the end of it all, as the place lay in ruins, he just moved away to another residence. Oh my goodness, he basically destroyed Welbeck Abbey, didn't he? He destroyed it. Okay, I guess he's left a curiosity behind, but anyway, I've heard they've restored it. I haven't been there. It just shows you the lengths that somebody will go to with their obsession. Different types of obsessions creating different things in the physical world. Even though I added a few haunting animations to this presentation, as is my wont, as is my obsession, I had a look online and could find no evidence that Welbeck Abbey is haunted. Usually there will be some ghost hunting group that has been there, but I can't see anything. So perhaps after the Duke passed over, he realised he had no more ailments, no more conditions, and that he was only playing that part that was not him, and thought, well, bugger this, I'm off. No need to hang around. I'm gone. And left behind a desolate ruin for his successor. Oh dear, I guess he had a chuckle afterwards. Still, it was a shame what he did to the Abbey. But he did create some amazing things underneath it. That cannot be denied. Yeah, this reminds me of a chap I met in Sydney in the early 90s. I didn't know him that well, and I didn't want to know him. He had a bit of a... His personality didn't appeal to me, but he was a friend of a friend, and he was the son of a very well-known Australian actor from the 50s and 60s. I cannot remember his name now, but the son was a heroin addict, and the father basically didn't really want anything to do with him, and so took out a long lease on a house in another state, that state being Sydney, for the son to live in. The rent was taken care of, and he also received money into his bank account every month to provide for his living expenses, which was quite good. It was, it was a 3-bedroom house, not bad, detached house. But, he was bloody hopeless. If it wasn't for that, he would have been on the streets. Anyway, after I met him a few times, we went to his place. He said, "You want to come and see something amazing?" And so we went down to the back of the house, and there in a storage cupboard, the opening of a storage cupboard, it led to subterranean chambers. He had actually dug it all out over the course of years and installed, electricity. He ran cables from the main house to this. He assured me he had not damaged the foundations, the structural foundations of the house. He had furnishings in there, a bed and a sofa and carpeting and other sort of homely fittings, but he assured me it was still a work in progress. And I asked him, did the owner of the house, the landlord, did he know about it? And he said, hell no. No, he would go crazy if he knew. So I can imagine after he dies or is forced to leave, the owner or the next residents are going to be in for a big shock when they discover that. And I found out his motive for doing that. It was so that he could eventually rent out the house and that he would live underneath it. In the back of his mind, he's thinking that extra cash is going to come in very handy, if you know what I mean. I just thought I'd share with you that strange story of another mole, but not by any obsessional shyness as with the Duke of Portland, but by a different obsession, an addiction. He needed more money, or he wanted more money. Well, he needed more money to feed the addiction, and so in the back of his mind, all this work was going to pay off because he would have that extra rent. Well, crazy things people do, with their addictions and obsessions. Well, my dears, I'm going to sign off now. I've got RSI in my hand and arms. I had it for quite a while. It's got progressively worse, and some months it's worse than others, and this month it's particularly annoying. So I'm going to stop for a while, do something else. Okay, my dears, take care, God bless, and see you next time. Thank you.